Albert Camus confronts us with a stark reality: life doesn't come with instructions, and no one ever promised it would make sense. We live, we search for meaning, we hope for clarity, but the world is indifferent. This tension between our need for meaning and the universe's silence is what Camus calls the absurd. It's unsettling, but it's also an invitation to see life in a new way. We're wired to look for patterns, to find reasons behind everything that happens. It's in our nature. We want to believe that our actions have significance, that there's something larger connecting all the pieces of our lives. But the universe doesn't care about our need for meaning. It just exists without explanation. And that's where the absurdity lies: our relentless search for answers in a place that gives us none. It's a tough pill to swallow. If life has no inherent meaning, why keep going? Why not just give up? Camus begins the myth of Sisyphus with this very question. He calls it the only serious philosophical issue, and he's not being dramatic. If everything we do is ultimately pointless, wouldn't it be easier to just quit? The thought crosses everyone's mind at some point. But here's where Camus turns things upside down. He rejects the idea of giving up. To him, suicide is a refusal to face the absurd, a way of running from reality. Instead, he proposes something that might seem counterintuitive: to live fully, in full awareness of life's absurdity. This is what he calls revolt. It's not about fighting back against the universe, it's about refusing to let the lack of meaning crush us. This revolt isn't passive. It's an active decision to engage with life, even though we know it's absurd. It's about living without illusions, without pretending that things will make sense someday. Once we accept that the universe is indifferent, we're free to stop searching for external meaning and start creating our own. And in that freedom, we can find a certain kind of peace. Camus illustrates this with the legend of Sisyphus, the man condemned by the gods to roll a boulder up a hill, only to watch it roll back down every time he reaches the top. It's the ultimate image of futility. But instead of seeing Sisyphus as a symbol of despair, Camus sees him as a hero. Sisyphus knows his task is pointless, but he keeps going. He chooses to keep pushing the rock, fully aware that it will never stay at the top. In that choice, he finds his freedom.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
We're not so different from Sisyphus. Every day, we push our own boulders uphill. We work, we strive, we chase goals, even though we know that in the grand scheme of things, none of it matters. We're not going to change the indifference of the universe. But that's not the point. The point is to live in spite of it. This isn't about giving up on meaning altogether. It's about realizing that meaning isn't something we discover, it's something we create. We don't need the universe to validate our existence. We don't need some grand, external purpose to justify our lives. We can find meaning in the simple act of living, in the relationships we build, in the experiences we choose to have. Camus isn't offering an easy way out. Accepting the absurd isn't the same as embracing nihilism. He's not saying that nothing matters or that we should just give up on everything. Instead, he's proposing a way to live more fully, more authentically. When we let go of the need for external meaning, we can focus on what really matters to us, right here, right now. It's a hard shift to make. Our entire culture is built around the idea that life should have some kind of ultimate purpose. We're bombarded with messages that tell us we need to achieve something, to find our true calling, to be part of something bigger than ourselves. And when we don't find that, we feel lost. But Camus would argue that this is exactly where we go wrong. We're looking for meaning in all the wrong places. The universe isn't going to give us answers. That's a fact. But that doesn't mean we have to stop living. It means we have to stop waiting for the universe to make sense and start living on our own terms. Camus calls this living without appeal, living without the need for some higher authority or external purpose to justify what we do. This isn't a rejection of life, it's an affirmation of it. It's about saying yes to life, with all its absurdity, all its confusion, all its lack of meaning. It's about embracing the messiness of existence and finding freedom in the act of living itself. The story of Sisyphus has a clear message. The struggle itself is enough to fill a person's heart. The act of pushing the boulder, that's where the meaning lies, not in some distant goal or final destination. And this is where Camus' philosophy becomes deeply practical. He's not talking about abstract concepts. He's talking about how we live our lives every single day. When we stop looking for some ultimate purpose, we're free to focus on the things that actually matter to us. We can find meaning in the relationships we build, in the work we do, in the simple pleasures of life. Not because these things are part of some grand cosmic plan, but because they make life worth living, even in the face of the absurd. But Camus doesn't sugarcoat things. He knows that life is hard, that suffering is real, that loss and pain are inevitable. He's not offering a way to escape those realities. Instead, he's offering a way to face them head-on, without the false hope that everything will magically make sense someday. When we stop expecting life to be something it's not, we can approach it with a different mindset. This is where the real power of Camus' philosophy lies, not in offering easy answers, but in giving us the tools to live with the unanswered questions. Once we accept the absurd, we can live with full awareness, without being burdened by the need for an explanation. We can face life's challenges with a different kind of strength, knowing that we don't need everything to make sense in order to keep going. And here's the strange thing: once we stop searching for external meaning, we often find it in the places we least expect. The small moments of connection with others, the quiet satisfaction of doing something well, the unexpected beauty of a sunset, these are the things that give life value. Not because they're part of some larger plan, but because they simply are. This doesn't mean that life will suddenly become easy. The struggles will still be there. The boulder will still roll back down the hill. But when we accept that this is just the way life works, we can stop fighting against it. We can find meaning in the act of living itself, even when the universe remains silent. At the heart of Camus' absurdism is a simple but profound idea: life doesn't have to make sense in order to be worth living. The absence of meaning isn't a reason to give up, it's a reason to live more fully. Once we let go of the need for answers, we can start living without fear, without hesitation, without waiting for the universe to explain itself. If life doesn't come with a manual, if there's no cosmic plan, no ultimate purpose laid out for us, then we're left with something terrifying, but also strangely liberating: the blank canvas of existence. Camus tells us that the universe is indifferent, but that indifference is a kind of freedom. We are not bound by any prescribed meaning, by any predetermined path. We are free to create our own meaning, to write our own story. And that, Camus believes, is where life truly begins. The tension between our need for meaning and the universe's refusal to provide it can feel overwhelming, even crushing. But Camus doesn't shy away from this tension, he leans into it. He argues that it's precisely in this conflict, in this clash between our desires and the silence of the cosmos, that life becomes most vivid, most real. The absurd doesn't diminish life's value, it enhances it, because it forces us to confront life on its own terms. So what does it mean to create meaning in an indifferent world? It's not about inventing some grand narrative or convincing ourselves that everything happens for a reason. It's about recognizing that the meaning we seek isn't out there waiting to be discovered. It's something we build, moment by moment, through our actions, our choices, and our relationships. This act of creation is deeply personal. For one person, meaning might be found in raising a family, in the bonds of love and shared experience. For another, it might be in the pursuit of knowledge, in the quest to understand the world, even if that understanding never leads to a final answer. For someone else, meaning might come from art, from creating something that expresses the complexity of human experience. The point is that there's no single answer, no universal meaning that applies to everyone. And that's a good thing. It's what makes life rich and diverse. Camus' philosophy doesn't offer a blueprint for how to live. It doesn't tell us what we should find meaningful. Instead, it challenges us to take responsibility for our own lives, to stop waiting for answers and start living. This is what he means by living without appeal. It's about letting go of the need for external validation, for some higher authority to tell us what matters. It's about embracing the freedom and the responsibility that comes with creating our own meaning. But this freedom is not without its challenges. When we stop looking to the universe for answers, we're left with the full weight of our own decisions. There's no one else to blame, no higher power to point to when things go wrong. We have to live with the consequences of our choices, knowing that there's no ultimate guarantee of success or fulfillment. This can be a daunting prospect, but it's also empowering. It means that our lives are truly our own, shaped by the choices we make, not by some predetermined fate. In this way, Camus' philosophy is a call to action. It's a reminder that life is happening right now, in every moment, and that we have the power to shape it. We don't have to wait for meaning to appear. We can create it through the way we live, through the connections we make, through the values we choose to embody. And this is not an abstract idea. It's something that plays out in the everyday moments of life, in the conversations we have, in the work we do, in the way we treat others. This approach to life requires a kind of courage, not the courage to face physical danger, but the courage to live authentically, without illusions. It's about accepting life as it is, with all its uncertainty, all its complexity, and still choosing to engage with it fully. This is the essence of what Camus calls revolt, not a rebellion against life, but a refusal to turn away from its challenges. Camus' absurdism is often misunderstood as a pessimistic or nihilistic philosophy, but nothing could be further from the truth. While it acknowledges the harsh realities of existence, it also offers a deep affirmation of life. It encourages us to find joy, not in some distant, imagined future, but in the present moment. It reminds us that the beauty of life lies not in its ultimate resolution, but in its ongoing, unfolding process. Think about the moments in your life that have felt truly meaningful. Chances are they weren't tied to some grand cosmic revelation. They were likely small, fleeting moments, an unexpected kindness from a stranger, a shared laugh with a friend, the quiet satisfaction of completing a task. These moments matter not because they're part of some larger divine plan, but because they're real. They happened. They touched you in some way. This is where meaning lives in the everyday experiences that make up our lives, not in some abstract, external purpose. But what about the darker side of life? What about suffering, loss, and injustice? How do we reconcile these realities with the idea of meaning-making in an indifferent world? Camus doesn't offer easy answers, but he does provide a framework for thinking about these difficult questions. For him, suffering is an unavoidable part of life, but it doesn't negate the possibility of finding meaning. On the contrary, it's often in the face of suffering that we're forced to confront the absurd most directly, and it's here that we must choose how to respond. This doesn't mean accepting suffering passively. It means acknowledging it, confronting it, and still choosing to live. It means finding ways to create meaning even in the midst of hardship. For Camus, the ultimate act of defiance is to live fully, even when life is difficult, even when it doesn't make sense. It's about refusing to give up, about continuing to push the boulder uphill, even though we know it will fall back down. This is where Camus' philosophy becomes truly radical. He's not offering a solution to life's problems. He's not telling us that everything will be okay if we just follow the right path. Instead, he's telling us that life is the problem, and that's okay. Life isn't something to be solved. It's something to be experienced in all its messiness, all its absurdity. And in that experience, we can find our own kind of meaning. So, what does it look like to live as an absurd hero? It's not about grand gestures or heroic feats. It's about the small, everyday choices we make. It's about choosing to live authentically, to create our own meaning, even when the world offers none. It's about finding joy in the act of living itself, rather than in some imagined future. It's about accepting that life is absurd, and that this absurdity is what makes it beautiful. In the end, Camus' absurdism is a philosophy of life, not of death. It's a call to live fully, to embrace the present moment, to stop waiting for answers and start living. It's a reminder that life's value doesn't come from some external source, it comes from us, from the way we choose to live, from the meaning we create in the face of life's indifference. Camus challenges us to face the absurd with courage, to live without illusions, and to find meaning in the act of living itself. It's not an easy path, but it's a deeply human one. And in a world that offers no guarantees, no ultimate purpose, this might be the most profound truth of all: life is not a problem to be solved, it's a reality to be lived. What does it mean to live without illusions? For Camus, it's about stripping away the comforting lies we tell ourselves that life has a predetermined meaning, that everything happens for a reason, that there's some ultimate answer waiting for us just around the corner. These illusions may provide temporary comfort, but they prevent us from seeing life for what it truly is: unpredictable, chaotic, and most of all, absurd. To live without illusions is to face this head-on, without flinching, and to keep going anyway. The idea of rejecting illusions doesn't mean abandoning hope or joy. It means accepting that these things are fleeting, that they aren't guaranteed by some cosmic scheme. It means recognizing that the happiness and meaning we experience are things we create ourselves, not gifts bestowed upon us by the universe. In this way, living without illusions is both sobering and empowering. It forces us to take responsibility for our own lives, for finding or creating value in a world that offers none. Camus' absurd hero isn't motivated by some grand ideal or higher purpose. Instead, they live for the present, for the experience of life as it is. They don't wait for answers, they make their own. To live this way takes a kind of courage, a willingness to face the uncertainties of life without retreating into false comforts. It means accepting that life is full of contradictions and that these contradictions are part of what makes life worth living. But this courage isn't about being fearless. It's about acknowledging fear, uncertainty, and confusion and choosing to live with them rather than running from them. The absurd hero doesn't deny the difficulties of life, they embrace them as part of the experience. They know that the boulder will roll back down the hill, but they push it up again anyway. For them, the struggle is not something to be avoided, it's where life's meaning is found. This idea can be unsettling. We're conditioned to think that meaning comes from something outside of ourselves, from some greater plan or purpose. But Camus tells us that the opposite is true. Meaning is something we create, moment by moment, through our actions and choices. It's not about finding meaning, it's about making it. And this can happen in the simplest of ways, in a meaningful conversation, in the pleasure of doing something well, in the beauty of nature or art. Think about the moments in your life that have felt truly meaningful. Chances are, they weren't tied to some grand cosmic revelation. They were likely small, fleeting moments, an unexpected kindness from a stranger, a shared laugh with a friend, the quiet satisfaction of completing a task. These moments matter not because they're part of some larger divine plan, but because they're real. They happened. They touched you in some way. This is where meaning lives, in the everyday experiences that make up our lives, not in some abstract external purpose. But what about the darker side of life? What about suffering, loss, and injustice? How do we reconcile these realities with the idea of meaning-making in an indifferent world? Camus doesn't offer easy answers, but he does provide a framework for thinking about these difficult questions. For him, suffering is an unavoidable part of life, but it doesn't negate the possibility of finding meaning. On the contrary, it's often in the face of suffering that we're forced to confront the absurd most directly, and it's here that we must choose how to respond. Camus argues that the proper response to suffering is not resignation or despair, but defiance. This defiance isn't about denying the reality of suffering or pretending that it doesn't matter. It's about refusing to let it define us, about continuing to live and create meaning even in the midst of hardship. This is the essence of the absurd hero's courage, the willingness to face the harsh realities of life without retreating into false hopes or illusions. Take, for example, the character of Mersault in The Stranger. After being condemned to death, Mersault doesn't seek comfort in religion or the hope of an afterlife. He accepts the absurdity of his situation, the fact that he will die and that his death, like his life, has no inherent meaning. But rather than falling into despair, Mersault finds a strange kind of peace. In his final moments, he embraces the indifference of the universe and, in doing so, discovers a freedom he had never known before. He realizes that without the need for external meaning, he is free to live fully in the present, to experience life as it is without illusions. This doesn't mean that suffering is something to be welcomed or celebrated. Camus is clear-eyed about the pain and injustice that exist in the world, but he also believes that we can find meaning and beauty in life, even in the face of these harsh realities. It's not about escaping suffering, it's about finding a way to live with it, to continue creating meaning even when the world seems indifferent to our struggles. This defiance in the face of suffering is at the heart of Camus' philosophy. It's a refusal to give in to despair, even when life seems meaningless. It's a commitment to living fully, to embracing both the joys and the sorrows of existence without retreating into comforting lies. This is what it means to live as an absurd hero, to face life's challenges with courage and resilience, and to continue creating meaning, even when the universe remains silent. At this point, some might argue that this philosophy sounds like a recipe for nihilism. If life has no inherent meaning, why bother doing anything at all? But Camus is careful to distinguish absurdism from nihilism. While nihilism suggests that life is meaningless and therefore nothing matters, absurdism acknowledges life's lack of inherent meaning but insists that we can still find meaning in our own experiences. In fact, Camus would argue that this acknowledgement of the absurd can lead to a more meaningful life, not a less meaningful one. Once we stop searching for some ultimate purpose, we're free to focus on the things that really matter to us. We're free to live in the present, to engage fully with the world as it is, rather than as we wish it to be. But this kind of living requires a shift in perspective. It requires us to stop looking for meaning in the future and start finding it in the present. Too often, we live our lives waiting for something to happen, for some event, achievement, or revelation that will finally make everything make sense. But Camus tells us that this is a trap. The future is uncertain, and the answers we seek may never come. The only thing we have is the present moment, and it's in this moment that we must create our meaning. This is where Camus' philosophy becomes deeply practical. He's not offering an abstract theory about the nature of existence. He's offering a way to live here and now, in the reality of everyday life. He's telling us to stop waiting for life to provide answers and to start living without them. He's challenging us to take responsibility for our own lives, to create our own meaning, and to live without appeal to some higher authority or external purpose. And in this way, Camus' absurdism is not a philosophy of despair, it's a philosophy of freedom. By embracing the absurd, we free ourselves from the need for external validation. We free ourselves from the pressure to find some ultimate purpose. We free ourselves to live fully, to engage with life as it is, rather than as we wish it to be. So, what does it mean to live as an absurd hero? It means living with full awareness of life's absurdity, without turning away from its challenges. It means creating meaning in the present moment, without waiting for the universe to provide it. It means embracing both the joys and the sorrows of life, without retreating into illusions or false hopes. And it means finding the courage to live without appeal, to live fully, even when the universe remains silent. In the end, Camus doesn't offer us easy answers. He doesn't promise that life will make sense or that everything will turn out the way we hope. But he does offer us a way to live with the uncertainty, to find meaning in the act of living itself. And in a world that offers no guarantees, this might be the most profound truth of all: life is not a problem to be solved, it's an experience to be lived.